Hi, this is Robert Thibodeau of Mayflower Bookshop, and I wanted to share a couple of simple ideas in astrology about Saturn going into Pisces and and Pluto going into Aquarius and Jupiter in Aries going into Taurus. Now, in a simple level, if we look at Saturn going into Pisces, we're looking at, like, Pisces rules drugs and getting high and escaping and religion and fantasies, and the 12th house of Pisces rules prisons and where you feel imprisoned. And I think when when Saturn goes through Pisces, we're probably going to see a lot of restrictions on the free use of medications and drugs. I mean, there'll be some kind of like laws and contraction that would take place on indiscriminate use of medicines, wrong use of medicines and drugs and marijuana and all that kind of stuff, legalizing hallucinatory, is that the right word? Legalizing microdosing on LSD. I mean, all that stuff would be like much more scientifically controlled, and the laws will probably clamp down, the idea of the problems with prisons. A lot of people are protesting difficulties with the way prisoners are treated in humane conditions. And so I think a lot of that's going to be exposed. There's going to be a lot of exposing of facts concerning religion and prisons and hospitals. And you notice that Saturn in Pisces is opposing Virgo. So the expense of medicine and hospitals is going to be very criticized. And people are going to kind of wake up where they're dreaming and fantasizing too much, the incredible fantasy of sex, that somehow we can like lose ourselves or find ourselves simultaneously with drugs or sex, Neptunian things, mystical adventures. You can see how many people are authorities of religion now, and they're authorities of Rudolf Steiner, and they're authorities of yoga, and they're authorities of theosophy, and the authorities are so fearful that they'll lose their position, and all they do is repeat and imitate the original teachings and founding, and hardly anybody's taking further steps. And I think that this is like there's a phenomenon going on that not a lot of people are paying attention to, and that is the diminishing numbers of people that belong to the Anthroposophical Society, the Theosophical Society, the Self-Realization Society, even the Manly Haw. I mean, although all these are trying to re-stir up the pot, the soup, stir it up again and get it going. But all the spiritual and religious organizations, like religions, are suffering attendance. And and so when Saturn comes into Pisces, on a positive note, we'll see some people really trying to bridge together religion, philosophy, and science in a way of human understanding, and that we can share virtuous ideas that would better ourselves in the world around us. And, you might think that Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, is the future. When Saturn goes into Pisces, the future doesn't look good. There's kind of like this war of awe against awe that I mentioned in my song, "Oh Angel." That, you can listen to it on YouTube. So I wanted to say something about this idea of Saturn in Pisces, and it's also squaring Sagittarius and Gemini, and it opposes, on a very simplistic level, when we look at these planets and their signs, we have to realize that Saturn's opposing Virgo. So that's a sharp contraction or criticism of the way hospitals are run. And you'll see the kind of war. Oh, you can hear my dog barking. He wants to come in. I got to let my dog in while I'm talking to you. He's outside. Hello, Mr. Jazzy. Come on, come on, come on. So Saturn opposing Virgo. Virgo's like the workplace. Virgo's like Virgo's the workplace, but Virgo's also like hospitals, and it's your health. And so Saturn opposing it is that people are concerned about getting the right facts when it comes to health. And so is there an authoritative block? Is there an authoritative block on getting, is there a lack of freedom in healing? Is that going to happen? Or is it going to be that hospitals and doctors are criticized the way they're handling things, you know? I mean, the way that they just indiscriminately hand out killers, the way that we handled COVID, the lack of freedom. So these are big issues. And the education of our kids, you know, Saturn square from Pisces squaring Sagittarius, which is education, higher education, Gemini's lower education. The way that we educate our children is going to be highly criticized and questioned, and travel restrictions, you know, with Saturn square Sagittarius of travel and higher education, right? And expansion. The Saturn would be squaring Sag, and Sag is like ruled by Jupiter, which is like happy-go-lucky expansion. And so there's got to be some kind of spiritual discipline, or it's like either we discipline ourselves or we'll be disciplined. So I wanted to give you a little hint about that, and you can see where Pluto in March, Saturn goes into Pisces and Pluto goes into Aquarius. Pluto leaves Capricorn of the plutocrat, who rules by power, money, and authority. And the wise people rule by wisdom and universal love. Selfless service to the future and greater sense of humanity. When Pluto goes into Aquarius, it's big brother or brotherhood. It's liberty, equality, fraternity, or the lack of it. And, last time Pluto was in Aquarius, I mean, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, this is a serious time where this unconscious power may come to the masses, but it also in other places would be denied. Democracy would be denied. And Pluto in Aquarius is a concern over collective issues. And Pluto opposes Leo, which is like when Pluto was in Capricorn these last years and opposed Cancer, water and air got tough. Pluto was squaring Libra, the air sign. Relationships and marriage was questioned. New kinds of understandings of partnership. And so when Pluto is now opposing Leo and leaving Capricorn, which was the opposition of Cancer, I think is the difficulty of having a home, and making it work, and the trouble of work versus home. Well, now it's the trouble of relationship with others, family and community versus individuality. And Pluto will be opposing Leo, the individual. So this is like the 1984 George Orwell kind of thing, of this kind of rewriting of history and rewriting of what's real, and people just getting erased, that you do something against the state or authority, like in China, for instance, and other dictatorial communistic countries, where if you say the wrong thing and do the wrong thing in China, or especially in China, you just disappear, and if anybody complains, they disappear. And so these things have to be brought out to the open and questioned, and America needs to rediscover their virtuous, their high heroic bravery for truth and universal love and compassion, and a way of living that isn't just entertainment, but it's like illuminating and enlightening and educational and edifying to our soul. Like we need to have healthy food for our body, but we need healthy food for our soul. And Pluto in Aquarius, it squares Scorpio, so we're going to see like a whole rewriting of like of what is sex, what is intimacy, is love and sex different? Can they work together? This whole kind of thing. And Pluto square in Aquarius squaring Taurus is a death and rebirth of the money system and what we value. And there's a danger of the Earth going into more of a crisis in many areas of death, of the planet. And our body won't be here the way it is if we kill the planet. Our physical body is kind of a planetary body that if we lived on other planets, we would completely mutate and metamorphosize if we survived. That we're a unique thing for this planet. You might say that God doesn't. God is so creative, or the universal wisdom and will, and the heart of the universe is so creative that it doesn't really. Everything's like every snowflake is different from other ones, and every human being is different. So, okay, I don't want to get lost, but Pluto, I want you to think about the idea. If you want to understand these planets going into another sign, think about what they're opposing and squaring. And so you have Pluto as death and rebirth of like hopes and dreams and friendships when it goes through Aquarius, right? But when it opposes Leo, you have like necessity of the world, and sufferings of the world, and totalitarian kind of regimes and dictatorial governments that are wiping out, challenging the individuality and individual sovereignty. Instead of a real human being having sovereignty, for instance, a corporation has individual sovereignty. And there's all these like weird materialistic, crude rules and underminings of what it means to be human and in relationship to a living planet that's healthy. So I just wanted to bring up a couple of those points, and when you look at Pluto square Scorpio and square Taurus and opposing Leo, you also see Pluto trining in Aquarius, trining Gemini, and trining Libra. And so we may see really powerful connections when people work together, how much can happen for the good when Pluto trines Libra. Associations and powerful relationships that 1 + 1 is 7 that rather than 2 or 1, And when you have Jupiter in May enter Taurus with Pluto squaring, the masses of people, Pluto, will be aware of the problems with the Earth. There might be a real, not a policing of ecology police, but a real honoring of the living nature of Earth and the need to heal the Earth. So Jupiter in Taurus will be a better understanding. I mean, some people may take advantage and they gamble with their investments but it'd be interesting to see whether cryptocurrencies find a place or they get wiped out for something new that comes along. Because Jupiter, Taurus is the return of hugging. Taurus is like huggable. And the return of loving the earth and having gardens. And let's hope that something really good happens there. Because the Pluto square will make us really aware of the problems, but the Jupiter will help us to collectively heal these problems and to have some kind of sanity when it comes to economics, that we don't have the filthy rich and the filthy poor, that we somehow bring that together and reintroduce a middle class. I love the idea that a friend of mine, Marianne Williamson, is running for president because she's a friend to a lot of people, but I got to hang out with her a bit in the past and work with her. And I think she's wonderful, and we need more like that. And it's amazing how many people put her down without addressing anything that she says. Just like people, like Steiner people put down Blavatsky, and I mean all the different spiritual. Even though Steiner came out of that, but people put down Osho, and Theosophy put down Steiner, Theosophy Company, and Theosophy, well, the Theosophical Society, not the company, and they put down Steiner, and they don't quote him, and they don't really look at the ideas that are there. So people live on opinion and hearsay and gossip, and people will like read the Bible, for instance, and just take out these quotes that support their belief system and their agenda and their desires and fears, and then they put down everything else. A lot of Christians think that this is the end time, yet Jesus says that you'll do greater miracles than I at the end times. At the end times, you do greater miracles than I. I don't see greater miracles happening. Must not be the end times. So, I mean, you can find quotes. Do you not know ye are gods in the becoming? Jesus says to the apostles. I think that might have been borrowed, the word gods, from the Neoplatonists, which means virtues in the becoming. It may help you to understand that, rather than an ego trip or gods in the becoming. Okay, so I'm getting lost here, but I wanted to point out that Jupiter in Taurus opposes Scorpio. So people who like the idea of Scorpio is like the positive side is the phoenix bird and the alchemist and the transformation of matter into spirit. But the negative side is selfishness and secrecy and exclusiveness and jealousy and attachment and intense psychodrama, and death and rebirth issues. And so when Jupiter's in Taurus, it makes, sex is just a natural thing. It's not a dirty thing. And there's a love for being natural and earthy and having things that matter, wanting to matter spiritually and honor form as revealing spirit. So Jupiter in Taurus will oppose Scorpio, but it was square Leo, and it was it was square Aquarius. So this is a like strong shift in sociological ideation that the Jupiter in Taurus squaring Pluto is a suffering or struggle with social identification and a death and rebirth of the social identity. For many people, they don't really have an individuality that can stand much alone. They have a social identity. And an example of that is if you were to take away the 7 people that you're closest to, let alone 25, you would really see that there's a lack of individuality that can stand alone. And so this question of what is individuality, what is family, who are your friends, these are important issues. So I wanted to approach this idea that when you look at the planets going into a new sign, especially the outer planets, I mean, eventually Neptune and Pisces will go into Aries, right? I mean, you look at what the planet, like Neptune and Pisces right now, probably has a lot to do with this legalization of drugs in a lot of places. And in a lot of ways, it's really good. If we know what people are on, we can deal with it. They take out the criminal element of it. But if we have drugs that don't have spiritual maps, like you're smoking marijuana, for instance, and you're smoking, and it's way too strong, and you don't have like the metaphysical, spiritual, religious books of the maps of the soul and the maps to the spiritual and astral plane. You don't have that kind of education, and you just get high to have pleasures and avoid pain and to be crazy. That it's not really good. And so you can learn a lot from the planetary positions by just the signs and what they oppose and what they square in a sense of sign and houses. And I know this is very fast and impulsive, and I have no notes. I'm just like banging away here later in the evening on this full moon in March. And I thought I would quickly share with you some of these ideas. And in March, I mean, speaking of March, we've had a lot of like really weird weather, and a lot of that has to do with this continuation of the planet Saturn, which is coldness or hardness or contraction, right? Contraction. That's going to go into Pisces. And Saturn's been midpointing Neptune Pluto, which is associated with its last conjunction in early Gemini in the late 1800s, where it triggered Theosophy and the Bhagavad Gita coming to the West and Buddhism coming to the West, and tons of scientific discoveries and expressions, electricity, all these kind of things, and the death of all the buffalo. Oh man, a lot of buffalo in America were just slaughtered unnecessarily and now replaced by cars that pollute rather than the buffalo, which created all the topsoil in the Midwest and in the Western Midwest. So there's these are things to just ponder. At some point, we're going to wake up. All of us are going to wake up. If we're going to have an Earth, we have to wake up to our responsibility to the future and not just live in the present and have fun and entertain ourselves and hang on to everything we can to protect ourselves. And we have this emptiness that isn't sacred, holy, great mother emptiness. It's the emptiness that can't be filled no matter how rich, no matter how much you get of something. And so it's part of my sharing in spiritual teachings is that I think most people lack in emptiness practice. Most people lack silence and stillness to balance out the incredible velocity and movement of thinking and feeling in the world around us. And the new mind that can arise between radical stillness and listening hearts. It's my original idea that the heart is the third ear, and that we can listen with our hearts, and we can see with our mind, and we can take a breath and imagine that we're enlivening the heart to be balancing out the head. So the head and the heart are the two wings of the soul. So in mid-March, we have a lot of Neptune aspects, Mars square Neptune, and it's going to be a really crazy time for lies and scandal and weather and wrong news, bad news, and propaganda. The positive side of Mars, besides active imagination where people feel and think too much and are overwhelmed, the positive side can be the hero or the heroic bravery for truth and compassionate love that has the ideals of the whole world in mind. So it can be radically great spiritual, mystical experiences that can further the evolution of the soul and discovery and adventure. But often the Neptune brings illusion and delusion and fantasy that isn't real, and drug overdoses and anger and shootings. And, Rudolf Steiner made quite a interesting articulation about in his Rosicrucian teachings of how Christian Rosenkreuz worked with Buddha and told Buddha to go to Mars or the astral plane. If we take it literally, we think that Buddha's on Mars. It's pretty far-fetched, and Steiner's been criticized for that by the materialist thinking. But really, it's Buddha. Compassion goes to the astral plane. So we have compassion for people who suffer with their attachments and their negative emotions and their anger, jealousy, all that stuff, So Mars will be squaring Neptune, which is associated with the goddess and mystical union, higher, like communion with higher virtues and ideals. So a lot of good can come out of this, and a lot of people, but the negative side is like Virgin Mary reports, lots of UFO sightings. And it's always been my opinion that the United States and advanced governments have advanced flying machines that we don't know about, and that all the UFOs are different versions of these new models they have of that. I don't know why we have so many secrets and that we don't share. Originally science was going to share everything to benefit humanity. And now if you don't make a weapon or something to sell, it's all secretive. And so these are, again, I'm sharing a lot of ideas that I'm hoping will stimulate a spiritual conversation, a freer conversation, a golden conversation of how we can get through this world and help each other be happier and not kill each other. In what Rudolf Steiner said, we're heading for the war of awe against awe, that everything will fight. I mean, the bugs will fight us, and the flowers and plants will want to fight each other and us because nobody's getting along. Why can't we all get along is becoming an important question. And is it true that we have to work on ourselves and find peace and love within ourselves before we can share that peace and love or truth? That the truth is really in our actions, in our deeds. I think that Buddha and Jesus said that you'll know them by their deeds and their actions. And then they both realized that people can kind of fake actions for a while to get what they want and to manipulate a situation. So then it was by their fruits you shall know them. It's like what happens when they're really old, and what happens to their kid's kid, and what happens to the earth. I remember this guy named Max Fisher told me once that every morning he pondered the problems of the world and the sufferings, and what could he do that would be beneficial, that would last 100 years. I think that's it really amazed me and stunned me that people could think like that, And so I wanted to quickly share this astrology thing, and I'm sharing, let's go over that again. I'm sharing the idea of Saturn going into Pisces, and we talked about it opposing Saturn, the restrictor and reformer and contractor, and sometimes known as the bad guy, but it's really it's either discipline yourself or you'll get disciplined, and it's authority and law sometimes, and it's going to oppose Virgo, which rules the workplace, and the Pisces Virgo thing is prisons and hospitals and places where you're contained. Is it healthy? And Saturn squares Gemini and Sag, a reevaluation of travel and education, and possibly a contraction or more rules. And then you have Pluto going into Aquarius, and I talked about how it opposes Leo. So the individual sovereignty is at stake. Is it big brother or brotherhood? Eventually Neptune will go into Aries, and Neptune will be spiritual new beginnings. Neptune will oppose Libra, partnerships and relationships. So that's a whole nother story of finding spiritual relationships. So I think I should end, and good luck with the middle of March. And I think when Jupiter goes into Taurus in May, a lot of people are going to take 1 to 7 steps to further and advance their life and their spiritual matters. And happiness in little things, happiness in just having a meal with friends and cooking at home and gardening at home or taking care of little ones and flowers. And, I think it might be the beginning of a year where it's brought up again about a world currency, something that we could work with the whole world with. Or is it just all getting divided further? Okay, I'm just here to give you some ideas to ponder. This isn't a professional astrology thing. This is just Robert, because a lot of people have been asking me to say something about it. And I did kind of think about it and take some notes and complicated aspects that are coming up in the next years. And I thought I should just, if I'm talking to a person at Mayflower Bookshop, I would just tell you, well, look at the signs and Saturn's discipline and contraction and the concern over those issues until at the beginning of the sign, and then it resolves them by the end. And it's that like that with all the planets, that at the beginning of that sign, that planet's going to have an effect on the cardinal cross. And it has, when it's going to have a beneficial effect on the trines. So when Saturn goes into Pisces, it will bring security to Cancer, right? And some security to Scorpio, but Scorpio has other issues going on. Some of these signs have these major planets hitting them good and bad, and a lot of us have positive and negative things happening simultaneously. So that can be part of that too. You have Jupiter coming into Taurus, and it's going to trine and make a beneficial aspect to Capricorn and Virgo. And so you had Pisces has been opposing Virgo and messing up all, confusing and distorting, mystifying or bringing spiritual experience to the mutable signs, but it's been trining Cancer and Scorpio. And so Cancer and Scorpio have been kind of dreaming for a while. And when Neptune goes into Aries, it will trine Sag and bring about mystical, magical travels again, and it would trine Leo and help them out too. So astrology is a sense of timing, and all the planetary aspects have a higher and lower octave, as I tried to elucidate in my book, Astrological Aspects, the Art. And so when you look at the planets and their movement, especially in these modern times, we have to reimagine astrology. We have to reimagine the planets as the lords of karma and the archangels that are thinking in bigger terms than individualities alone. We have to think of the higher octave and virtue of these planets that we can attune to and be empowered by to live in grace and honor and dignity and respect and in noble virtue and good work, noble quest. So that is the game. And, when you read The Voice of the Silence by Blavatsky, she has the 7 virtues, the seventh is emptiness or prajna. The Tibetan Buddhists have 6 virtues, but really the 7th is a selfless kind of learning. Simultaneous, that selfless learning is emptiness practice, and the prajna is our grasp of this in a wise way. So the planets have a higher and lower octave. Out of our freedom and our capacity and our education, we aspire to the higher octave, but we're aware of the lower octave so we don't get entangled in it, and we can help others with it. So, okay, I've gone 33, 34 minutes. That's good enough. This is Robert of Mayflower Bookshop, and I'll meet you again with another sharing of knowledge. And I'm from the Mayflower Bookshop in Berkeley, Michigan. And I do astrological readings. Yeah, you can learn about it at mayflowerbookshop.com or call. See ya.